You'll have seen the red light in the left-hand corner of your screen has come on. That means that the webinar is being recorded from now. So today's webinar, who's this for? Today's webinar is specifically aimed at young people with intellectual disability who are about to or have just left school, and of course their families. We will talk about the important things you need to know about finding and keeping work in open employment, what works, how families can help, and the supports that you can access. We will look at the Everyone Can Work website, and we'll have a guest speaker talking about their open employment experience. The Everyone Can Work website and webinars have been developed by Inclusion Australia. Inclusion Australia is the national peak organisation that represents people with intellectual disability and their families. The project was funded by an NDIS ILC grant. ILC stands for Information Linkages and Capacity Building and aims to create inclusive communities. And of course, having a job in open employment is one of the most important and best ways to help people with intellectual disability be truly included in our community as adults. We're offered 3 other workshops for people at different ages and stages, and all are designed to help people with intellectual disability have success in open employment. As I mentioned, this is workshop 3 out of the 4, and all 4 will be available on our website in a recorded manner for you to access later on or to recommend to someone else if you think that that would help them. So the first thing that we would like to start with is just a short icebreaker activity. Make sure everyone's familiar with the chat function and give you the opportunity to let me know what it is that you're hoping to get out of this session. It's very helpful for us to know because we can blend in some specific answers to questions, or I can spend a little bit longer on some elements of the webinar than others if we know that that's of particular interest to you. So would invite you at this stage to just pop into the chat stream, anything that you'd like to tell us about who you are and what you're looking to get out of today's session. No questions? I'll just give another minute just to check that no one would like to just let us know the age of their family member, or if there's any particular things that you've been finding tricky or were hoping to get out of today's session. We'd be delighted to take a question in the chat at this time. All right. Looks like hopefully we'll have longer for question time later on in the session. So today we're talking about employment pathways. Now, very often young people with intellectual disability go straight from high school into ADEs or day programs. And there's a number of reasons why this happens. Any family member will tell you that time disappears. Many families of young people with intellectual disability talk about the experience of leaving school as falling off a cliff. One moment you have a routine with support, the next moment, while everyone else is doing end of year exams, you are on your own navigating the world of adult disability services. And this abrupt change can cause people to make rushed, sometimes uninformed decisions. Low community expectations. All of you will be familiar, I'm sure, about hearing things said like, that's all they can manage, or they wouldn't be able to do a real job. They're happy there with their friends, that's all that matters. So many young people are put on this pathway even when they are at school, such as only having work experience at an Australian disability enterprise or similar environment. There's some complexities with traditional employment support services, so DES, Disability Employment Services. Mostly they don't provide the level of support that people with intellectual disability need to importantly keep a job, and also Sometimes people with intellectual disability don't meet the eligibility thresholds, and it's hard to get support from a DES. And it's hard to find information. It's hard to find information about open employment. It's hard to find information about how to navigate all the different systems. Another thing people worry about is impact on the DSP. There's a lot of misunderstandings about the impact of earning a wage in open employment on the disability support pension. A lot of closed workplaces pay low wages at a rate that they assure people won't affect their pension. And so therefore, many people come to believe if they earn over that rate, they will lose much of their pension. But in fact, the DSP rules allow people to work up to 29 hours a week without losing their payment. And for most people, for every dollar that they earn, and the first $178 a fortnight they earn has no effect on your pension. And for most people, every dollar that they earn beyond that, they lose 50 cents of their pension. So actually working always means that people will have a higher income. So all of this has made it much harder for people with intellectual disability to choose a pathway to open employment. And so the Everyone Can Work website was developed to bring together all the information you need to think about work options and to find the support that you need. There's been some recent important changes to supports available that we'll tell you about, and there is more information on the Everyone Can Work website. Now, to start off with today, we thought, as we do with all of our workshops, to hear from someone with intellectual disability to tell their story about open employment. And in today's story, we're going to hear about a family getting into the workforce after school. Lisa and her sister Lizzie set up a micro-enterprise making fashionable clothing protectors and selling them online and at markets. And Lizzie, Lisa and Tanya are going to share their experience of Lisa getting into open employment. Now, unfortunately, the three women are not available to talk to us in person today, so we actually have a pre-recording of their story. So this time round, we won't be able to ask them questions, but we think you might find their story very interesting. This is our first story about a micro-enterprise. So this is a new thing for anyone who's been to any of our previous workshops. Evan, I'd like to now introduce you to Lisa, Lizzie and Tanya, and Evan will start the video.
Lisa, and she is 20. Our business is called Ellen Designs and we're the co-owners. We've been running it for about 11 months and we sell more fashionable or like more fashion forward makeup clothes protectors for people who maybe have a disability.
My name's Tanya Harris and I'm Lisa and Lizzie's mum. Lisa is very determined, very stubborn. She's, very sweet, but she likes things her way. She's very verbal, doesn't use spoken language, but and really tough. She looks pretty fragile, but she's definitely not. So I guess what I wanted was for her to be happy and healthy and as many opportunities as she could. So yeah, that was what I wanted when she was growing up and what I still want now, I think. Lisa went to an ed support school from kindy, so when she was 3 to she was like 18, her whole sort of school life. The options that were presented to us before Lisa finished school, so prior to the NDIS, were, those sort of recreational activities, day centres and groups, a couple of times a week or something. The assumption was that she wouldn't work. The idea of Lisa going into a day program a couple of days a week didn't, make me very happy. It didn't seem like it would be particularly interesting or fulfilling or stimulating or any way to kind of live a life. Lisa finished school a year and a half before the NDIS came in. Prior to the NDIS, there wasn't a lot of choices, but we started planning pretty quickly once the NDIS came to our area. We knew that that micro enterprises were something that could be included in an NDIS plan. We weren't really sure how that worked. Lisa got her NDIS plan and worked out Valued Lives could help with, business planning and all that kind of thing. And
first, what we did was contact Valued Lives, which works with people with disabilities who want to start their own businesses. The first step was doing the business plan and finding out, how to get an ABN and how to do all these different things like sewing, marketing, taking good pictures. The role that Lisa plays is mainly picking out which fabric she likes and which patterns and what she wants to post, and she also models most of the things, as you can see.
I think to parents that are feeling overwhelmed as their kids are getting to adulthood, is really to try to connect to other parents that have been through it, to find a good support network, and you can take your time and see what fits, and you can try different things. It's not going to be right the first time, and it doesn't matter, that's okay. I think be really creative as well. There's so many options out there now, and really finding out what your kid wants to do, or giving them options, because sometimes you might not know and they might not be able to tell you. And I think it's through, meeting other people and seeing what other people are doing. Work looks different, for different people. Not everybody, goes to work in an office or a factory. Understanding the role of support workers and what they can play, that they're not just there to do personal care, but they're there to actually support you in your life and in what you want to do, so helping you do things that you can't do. Yeah, I've seen lots of benefits for Lisa in that, she has to attend meetings, and so she has, I think, worked out that she's got to contribute as well, which has been good for patients. And also, I think, getting out, selling stuff at, markets and being at markets, and has been sort of beneficial. Yeah, so part of the benefits, I think, going to the markets and being sort of, in crowds of people or with a lot of people. She's kind of learning, I guess, how to manage that kind of being in those kind of places as well. And I think she's getting, better and better at making her own decisions, but also compromising, I guess. And it's been a great benefit, I think, to her and Lisa, or to Lisa and Lizzie's relationship, in that they have to work together. They're both, co-owners, so they have to compromise, they have to learn how to communicate in a really different way with each other that they, wouldn't have had to before. So she's had to learn a bit of patience and a bit of negotiation. And I think as time has gone on, the support that I provide is probably less.
I think people with disabilities, I feel like anyone would really want a way to support themselves. I think everyone would prefer that than focusing on NDIS funding. I know that Lisa really enjoys it. I think what Lisa likes the most about the business is getting to work with her family, having a lot of more money and more freedom in that sense. It's Lisa, and she
Hello again. So that story comes to you from Western Australia, and because you might have wondered about how the fact that the NDIS hadn't come, but the business has only been going for 11 months, and that's because that's a West Australia family that we're very happy to share their story. So we always like to talk about why open employment is important, and just to clarify that everyone knows what we mean by what we say when we say open employment. What we mean are jobs that are open to everyone. They're same jobs that people with and without disability might get. That's people with and without disability working together in the jobs in the market that we're all part of. And it's the jobs market, as you could see from that story, that it could be as an employee, it could be as an employer, it could be with your own micro business. It's anywhere where you're earning an income, and it's you're working on the same playing field as everyone else. And everyone has the right to work in open employment. But unfortunately, NDIS data shows that it could be as low as 15% of people with intellectual disability actually get to work in open employment. And the question is, why is it that important? And researchers have talked with people with intellectual disability and their family about their employment experiences. They found that people have a better quality of life, improved physical and mental health when they work in open employment, even if it's only a few hours per week. And this is because earning a fair wage leads to better standard of living and less risk of poverty. We heard today how Lisa appreciates the extra money in her pocket and the freedom and independence that brings. People feel more important and valued due to learning and using skills, and it improves how other people see them. Working in open employment means meeting more people, making more friends, and having more social opportunities. It leads to greater independence, and also people tend to work longer in open employment and have a fuller life with more purpose and meaning. So now into the nitty-gritty of today. Open employment, what works after school? So one of the things that research shows is that people with intellectual disability have a much higher chance of success in open employment where their families support them to find work. Again, today's example shows what a critical role the family is playing in helping Lisa be independent and have a real job. Now, whether it's every day from time to time or somewhere in between, having this support is really important when it comes to find a job. You know, and I'm absolutely the last person to want to put any more pressure on families, but I have to tell you that the research says that success, the biggest predictor of success in open employment is family expectation. And so if that's what you expect, it's more likely that your young person is going to grow up and have the same expectation of themselves. We'll talk some detail, specifically some things that you can do now in a couple of minutes. Now, many young people with intellectual disability will have already had some opportunities to explore work and take part in work experience as part of their school transition program, and even some might have a part-time job. But leaving school is sort of the real time that we can focus on employment itself. So it's really important to know about the things that we can do at this stage so that we know what will really help people to become successful in open employment. For example, some people leaving school have some idea of what they want to do. But of course, the majority of school leavers actually still need quite a lot of time to work out, to explore the possibilities that might be available and work out it is what they want to do. And particularly for people with intellectual disability who might have a narrower understanding of the jobs that are available or what work means or what things might be, they might be able to try. Other important success factors are customised employment. So customised employment helps you work out what you want to do, helps you get ready for employment, and helps you get work that suits you. And there are terms such as discovery, job creation, job carving, and micro-enterprise that we might come across when we're talking about customised employment. So research shows that for people with intellectual disability in particular, a customised employment process can be very effective in helping people move into open employment. It helps people explore what kinds of work might suit them. It includes a discovery process, which is something that might happen over weeks, which helps the person work out what they might want to do. Customised employment also supports people with on-the-job learning and skills development through work experience and provides support to get a job or self-employment. And while one of the reasons that people with intellectual disability can struggle to find regular jobs in open employment is there's often, you can see that there's a job there and you think, oh yes, my young person could do maybe 50% of that or 70% of that, but there's 2 or 3 tasks in the job that really would be very difficult for that person to do on their own. So customized employment is about a tailoring of the job to suit the person's strengths and tailoring it so that you're not expecting someone to do something that sets them up to fail. Another thing that the research shows really clearly is on-the-job learning is the way to learn about work. So people with intellectual disability learn work skills best in the workplace. It's true of all of us. I mean, if you can just go back to your very first job, it wasn't until you were at work that you learnt about some of the the subtle unspoken things about work or the rules of the hierarchy. If you're the youngest person or the person most recently employed, you might get the job of sweeping the floor in the bakery. It's a job that people are very happy to hand on. If you're the most recent person to join in a organisation that does a lot of office works, maybe you're the person that takes the notes in meetings. There's a whole lot of job things that you find out about hierarchies and skill sets and how things work. And research shows that a significant amount of experiences will increase the chance of finding and keeping a job in open employment. So this means giving your young person the opportunity to try things, to find out what they like and what they don't like. A lot of people think that if a work placement hasn't gone well or work experience hasn't gone well, that means it's a failure. But sometimes they can be so helpful in telling you what someone actually doesn't like doing. And you can really start to articulate, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. I know my own son has asked to do some work experience at McDonald's. He's very fond of hot chips. And so he thought that he might like a job at McDonald's. But when he went there, what he discovered is in fast food, you spend a lot of time cleaning. And so he learned how to clean floors, windows, tables. He learned to take the rubbish out. He learned all sorts of things about cleaning. But at the end of the 10 weeks, said to him, do you like that job better or do you like another job that you did where you got to serve customers all the time? He said, I prefer serving customers. So it helps them learn what jobs are about, and it helps them also articulate, why do you like this? When you've had a few work experiences, why did you like this one more than this one? What did you like better? What did you like worse? It gives you something to talk about to really flush out what people like and what they don't. And then another thing for people with intellectual disability is they quite often need ongoing support to do their job. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have someone with them every day, every hour of every day, but it means often you do need to have regular check-ins because changes, of course, can throw people off their routine. And you need to have someone there to help you navigate changes, whether it's changes in your tasks or changes in the people that you work with or other changes, such as a pandemic arriving. So the Everyone Can Work website has a lot more information on what is available after leaving school, including quite a big section on customised employment. So support to find and keep a job. Where is it that you can get support once you've left school? And for today, we are primarily going to be talking about disability employment services and the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So DES providers can help people whether or not they have an NDIS plan. The two systems are not related to each other. So if you're not an NDIS participant, you certainly can access DES. If you're a DES participant, it doesn't stop you being an NDIS participant. The two are completely separate. DES providers provide help to get work ready and find a job and can provide some workplace support. The critical thing is you need to be eligible for DES, and to do that, you need to be able to work more than 8 hours a week. DES is paid for directly by the federal government, but the problem is that they're not always resourced to provide high ongoing level of support. There is a type of support available in DES called ongoing support, and there's moderate ongoing support and high ongoing support, but not all providers do that, and not all providers are good at making sure that they access the supports that are available for people with intellectual disability. The good news is that there are a small number of specialist DES providers that have very good records supporting people with intellectual disability, but the downside is there's not even one in every state and territory. They're mainly centred around big centres like Melbourne and Sydney, and there's a provider in Adelaide that's pretty good as well. So therefore, NDIS supports for employment are critical. Until quite recently, most school leavers with intellectual disability use their NDIS plans to work in an Australian disability enterprise, which is what we call closed employment. And closed employment is where you only work with other people with disability, and the people without disability tend to just be the supporters and the managers. But in June, the NDIA made, or technically, I think the 1st of July, the NDIA brought in a whole lot of changes that really could be quite useful for people with intellectual disability to work in open employment. Now, the one that you probably have heard of that's been around for the longest is School Leaver Employment Supports, also known as SLES. And this funding is available to help people with the transition, but it doesn't really kick in till halfway through year 12 or even after year 12. And also, despite the NDIS information saying it's available for school leavers up to 22 years old or so, anecdotally, we know that it can be very hard to get SLES unless you ask for it in the year you actually leave school. So some people have been okay doing a year of SLES, then doing something else, and then coming back and getting some more support through SLES. But it appears that you might miss that opportunity if you don't get it the first year after school. So it doesn't seem to go so well if you transition out of school, do something else for a year, then try to get SLES. That can be harder. And also, SLES can be quite rigid. Whilst we have heard that SLES support offered by DES providers is often successful as a pathway to open employment, most SLES providers, especially providers that also provide day programs, they tend to structure SLES like a day program. You know, it's set days, most of the learning is in groups, and even quite a lot of the work experience is in groups at the same employer. It's not very person-centred. But the great news is that the NDIS has brought in a new support item called employment support. Now, weirdly, if you are familiar with the NDIS price guide, they also call it workplace assistance. So it can be confusing, but the two things, as far as I can tell when I read the price guide, mean the same thing. Now, this support item could be used to explore what work would mean for a person. So that's called the discovery process. It can be used to build essential foundation skills for work. It can be used to manage complex barriers to obtaining and sustaining employment. It can be used for specialised job customisation. So that's what I was talking about before, where you customise a job specifically to a particular person's skills and strengths. It can be used to support transition from an Australian disability enterprise to open employment. It can be used to develop a career plan, and it can be used to other capacity building supports that are likely to lead to successful engagement in a disability employment service. In fact, when SLES was started, it was designed to be a progression to DES, but that hasn't really turned out to happen in real life. A lot of people transition from SLES into a day program, or at the end of SLES still are not ready to engage with a DES provider for open employment. Another problem a little bit with SLES, particularly SLES provided by day programs, is they often have a conflict of interest because the day program actually will lose the young person as a client if they go on into open employment, whereas if they get transition into other programs that the provider provides, such as a day program, then they get to keep them as a client. And so it's something you've always got to be able to keep in mind, that sometimes the providers, even though they're definitely trying to do the right thing by you in terms of the services they provide, they don't necessarily prefer you on to services that they don't provide. And so you've got to keep that in mind when you're getting information from them. But the new employment support available through the NDIS means that participants of working age can ask for supports in their plan to find and keep work in open employment, which might mean, as I said, employee, self-employed, or a family business. Now, this is really important because in the old days of state-funded supports, you couldn't get any support for work until after you'd left school. Didn't give you a chance to have a part-time job or a casual job. It didn't give you a chance to do some of your skills development while you were still at school. So for any of you that are still at school, you can start asking for this support in your plan now, but remember that you'll need to have an employment goal in your plan. And you'll also need timely contact with your local area coordinator or planner to discuss employment supports. And it's important to think about what your goal might be. And just to reiterate, there are many providers of NDIS supports for employment, including DES and other providers. It's important to know that NDIS supports for employment is that your support should be individualised. It should be about your young person and their strengths and what they're interested in, and not everything in a group, and not assuming that everyone in the group will be interested in the same things. It's important that you know that you can choose who supports you. You don't have to fit into a program, and you don't have to share all of your supports with other people. So you might ask, what are the things that we might be able to do now? What is it that we could do now that would help my young person? There are a number of things that you can do now for a head start to open employment, even though you haven't, you might be thinking now, oh, maybe we might go back to the NDIS and talk about a change to our plan, or maybe we might ask for some extra supports in the plan. But we all know that that can be a bit of a slow process. So the question is, what can you do now? So one of the things that's really critical is to have family chats about the benefits of working, including meeting people, enjoying the work, earning an income. I think a lot of us, and I know I'm guilty of this too, can come home from work and talk about being tired or sick of work or cross with people at work or some other negative thing about work. It's really making a conscious effort to make sure that we talk about work positively at home and positively about the benefits that it brings to our lives. Even better than family chats, have a family meeting. Remember that NDIS planning meetings are not actually planning meetings. They're actually funding meetings. You don't do proper planning. You don't think about what you might do next. You don't map out a pathway. So having a family meeting, and I'm saying this is something that you can get your NDIS plan to cover. You can get some money for this, but you can just do this informally as well. And certainly before there was an NDIS, this is the sorts of things that we used to suggest to families. So get together a group of people that know and care about your young person and brainstorm away. All you need is butcher's paper, maybe a few coloured texters. If you've got someone that's good at drawing it as well as writing it, that can be helpful. And then ask questions. What does your young person say they are interested in? Some very interesting perspectives come from siblings, friends, and support workers. If you're already using support workers for something else, totally different. Maybe you've got a support worker helping with speech pathology, or maybe you're getting a support worker to help with community participation, but they may probably learn something about preferences. You noticed in today's story that Lisa is nonverbal, but her family are quite clear on her preferences. It's clear that there's good communication going on and that they understand her preferences. So what are the other people around your young person saying about their preferences? What do you know that they enjoy and they're good at? I know one young woman who's really good at putting things away, and her work experience at a library has been fantastic. So there's all sorts of things that you can do if you really think about what people like doing and what their strengths are. You can talk about the different kinds of jobs you see people doing while you're out and about or on TV, watching their favorite programs. Even any movie will have some information about jobs in there. And look at ideas and possibilities for work experience and casual jobs in your local community. Working locally has a lot of benefits, and I am going to come back to the COVID question, but certainly it's something that I've been thinking about. My son's transitioned out of school and we had everything set up for him to have a job in the city, and it's quite clear we'll be looking at March or April next year before we get anywhere close to that. And we have a lot of questions to ask ourselves of what might we do in the meantime. And I can tell you specifically that some of the suggestions I'm suggesting to you here are things that we are trying to get ourselves organised to do as well. On our website, on the Everyone Can Work website, we've got some tips around this sort of things about, you know, looking at your local community directory or drawing a mud map of businesses near you to really think about what might work. Another tip is to start travel training. It's as scary as anything, travel training, but it's the first thing the specialist DES providers do. And in fact, some DES providers will not take a person on to help them get support for open employment if the family is not prepared to support independent travel and travel training. It's a key element of an independent life. So this is something that doesn't happen overnight. You need to teach resilience, including opportunities to experience and overcome failure. Talk through some what if situations. What if they miss the train stop or the bus stop? How can they use their phone to let you know where they are? You know, could they take photos of street signs? Could they take photos of where they are? Not photos with them in it, but photos of what they can see. And then maybe you can help work out where they are. Do you need, and of course, in the era of the smartphone, you might also have a Find My iPhone or whatever app turned on, so you can work out where they are. And nearly all of us, it's very interesting in intellectual disabilities. There's a whole lot of horror stories about people that miss buses or miss trains or whatever. And it's amazing how things work out. And once that's happened once, it's really great. My own son caught a bus home from school regularly, and quite early in year 7, he'd only been catching the bus, I reckon, for a couple of months. The bus just didn't stop at his stop. And he actually did yell out and managed to get off at the next stop and walk back to where I was. I was at that stage still meeting him at the bus stop. But really, up to that point, when I'd been saying, what if something happens? He was like, oh, it won't happen. And he learnt that it could happen. And he learned actually to have the confidence to call out to the bus driver, and then other people help, saying, no, you need to stop, you need to stop. Because back, you know, you do hear some stories that if people with intellectual disability miss the bus or train stop, they can often stay on the bus or the train till the end. They sort of get stuck in not knowing what to do next. So there's all sorts of practicing you can do in terms of public transport. For example, do you need to apply for a special travel card? These are often free for people who can travel independently, but find it hard to navigate the payment systems. So often you can't get a free travel card if the person will always travel with a support person. For those, you would those situations, you'd usually use a companion card. But if the person is likely to be able to travel by themselves, then a free card can be very helpful. And the other thing to do is to develop road crossing strategies. And of course, all of these things that I've just talked about, you could get some support from your NDIS plan to do. One of the things to remember is that even though you might not have, if you're already an NDIS participant, even though you might not have supports in your plan for employment now, you might have some core supports. You might have some community participation support or other sorts of supports for your young person. Now, the supports in employment are often paid at a better rate because they're capacity building, and you really do want to get them in your plan. But you can just use those support workers to do things like travel training. You can organise to go to your local shopping centre. You can think about the road crossing techniques that you might need to use around your home. How can you get from your house to the nearest public transport? Is it walking? What roads do you need to cross? So thinking about all of that is actually really critical to employment success. At home, talk about things that are important when you're working. Good hygiene, the right clothes for work, being on time, good manners, working together with other people, workplace rules and how they're sometimes unspoken, what is okay and what isn't. Certainly I find when my son's resisting doing some things, that saying to him, do you want to move out of home and get a job? Yes. Well, this is practicing. So I don't tell him that something's a chore. We say we're practicing for when you're going to be independent and when you're going to live by yourself. And the last thing to say is get support. Reach out to families, friends, peer support networks, as well as funded supports to find work experience, part-time job. Young people without disability often get advice and help about work experience and finding a job from family, friends, and other people in the community. And there's no reason why you can't do this for your person with intellectual disability as well. This is known by the researchers as social capital. And social capitals, it's the networks that you have, the people that you have contact with in your everyday life and local community, and thinking about how they might be able to help. You can make a list, talk to the people on your list to ask if they can help. People are usually very happy to be asked. There are more tips about this in the website. One example that I have is that we asked a person at school to come home from school with my son when he was in year 9 at a different campus because there was a difficult road crossing to happen. And so asking people to be buddies can help. Now, the very first person I asked turned me down. And so that was a little bit of a shock. It always feels very personal. But there are things that you can do. Firstly, it's be brave and talk to other people and maybe have a second go, because the second person I asked said yes. Or you can use your NDIS plan and your support workers to do some of the asking for you. So there's lots of, in the modern era with the NDIS, we have lots of opportunities to use the money in the plans very flexibly and thoughtfully. And this thing that in the old days where everything fell upon families, there's still a lot of the planning and the thinking falls on families, but there really is support available. You don't have to do it all yourself. It's something that you might need to learn how to do, and it's a bit hard to let go sometimes, but it really can happen. So we have some minutes now to answer questions. So I would invite you to put questions in the chat, or if you'd like to, turn on your unmute yourself and turn on your camera and ask some questions. But I am going to start with a question in the chat from Jackie. What do I think about the effect of COVID-19 on what is essentially a wasted years of SLED's funding? I have to say that Inclusion Australia is a systemic advocacy organisation, as well as an organisation made up of people with intellectual disability and their families. And this has been something we've been advocating on. The NDIS is certainly considering whether people might need longer in SLES. But it's not clear yet until people start asking. So we would really encourage you that if you are in your second year of SLES this year and it hasn't gone well because of COVID and you haven't had the work experience opportunities that you would expect, I would suggest that you ask for it again in your plan, ask for it for a third time and see how you go. And if you're not successful, could I encourage you to let us know just through the contact us on the Inclusion Australia website to let us know if you're having trouble, because that is something that we are more than happy to pick up at a systemic level and talk to the NDIA about. The other thing is, yes, it's hard to feel, it is hard to feel that it's been wasted. I know in my son's case, we had all this stuff set up. We went to a SLES with a DES provider and everything was set up, and the week he was about to start the placement was the week that the lockdown hit. And now with all the various rules about density of workers and all the rest of it, it's clear that the people with intellectual disability were the last ones to come back. And certainly we're seriously considering maybe saying to the NDIS at our plan review that we might get a 6-month plan and not include SLES in it, and just include other employment support and do some local person-centred planning and other things for him, and then maybe pick up SLES again sometime next year. So, you know, there are ways of doing it. Question, can you use a DES service to find part-time work, casual work when you're still at school? Generally, no. Generally, a DES is available for people who are going to work more than 8 hours a week. Most people, in my experience, don't have a part-time job that's more than 8 hours a week. And the other problem with the DES eligibility is it has to be an average over the year. So we do have a case study on our website about a young woman who actually got a job at a sports broadcaster that was advertised through Down Syndrome Victoria, the local disability specific organisation, and they got a 4-hour-a-week job. Then they used their NDIS funding to build that 4-hour-a-week job into a 9-hour-a-week job. And then she was able to get support from a DES provider. But then it turned out that the job she had was related to the AFL season. So for about 9 months of the year, she averaged 9 hours a week. But for 3 months of the year, it went back to 4 hours a week, not able to use the DES funding. So we're also doing some work, advocacy work, to explain that this is a major barrier to support for open employment for people with intellectual disability, and certainly will, you know, put on our website if we have any success there, but in general not. The other thing, actually, when you ask me that, is I'm not sure of the age. I think you have to be over 16 to get DES support. I'm not absolutely sure there. How can you use SLES funding and use a DES provider? You can only use your SLES funding with DES providers that also provide SLES. So it means looking up DES providers and looking up at the name of the organisation, going onto the organisation's website and finding out if they also do SLES and DES. So unfortunately, that's a case-by-case basis depending on where you live, and you learn about it by calling them. And talking to them about it. One of the other ways to do it is to look at an organisation's website. But I have to tell you, even my team have looked at websites, and it's very hard to tell. The providers are so good at using language around person-centred supports and all these things that it gets completely masked. They often don't tell you on the website where the funding comes from, whether they're a DES provider or not. Eben, could you very quickly go back to slide 9? And I just want to show you that, or maybe I've got it wrong. It was the one you put up, the support to find and keep a job. It's Nick, no, keep going forward. Next slide. That one. So just look there. Can you see that logo, that Disability Employment Services logo? That's another thing to look for on a website. Sometimes they won't tell you that they're a DES provider, but they will have that logo on that website which says that they are a DES provider. So that logo is an important signpost to whether or not someone provides DES supports. And then it's a matter of, or you could look up the DES, look for DES providers and ring them up to ask them if they provide SLES supports. But the other thing is, you could use in your plan the employment support funding and get an independent, through Hire Up or just someone that who runs there, who's just a support person, is a support worker, an independent support worker, and you could just work together with them to develop your own plan. So, and there are other things that you might do. There are a small number of providers now who are providing discovery. So you might want to spend a small amount of you won't be able to use your SLES funding for this, but the employment support funding you might be able to use to do a discovery process where a provider actually does the whole discovery process in terms of learning what your person is interested in and doing something over a series. It might take 8 weeks or 12 weeks to do, to put together a sort of a portfolio for your young person, and you can do that with the employment supports. We've got about 1 more minute for questions before we move on to the last part of the workshop and talk about the website. Does anyone have any other questions? Feel free to turn your microphone on or put it in the chat. So just to reiterate finally that the two systems, the DES and the NDIS, and the SLES sits under NDIS, are separate systems. So you can't use one funding for the other, but you can use them to work together. So, for example, if someone's getting DES support for a job, but there's a skill they need to develop, let's say giving change, it would be hoped that the DES provider would give you some strategies about learning to give change, but you might not be able to get enough hours of support, and maybe you might use some of your other capacity building money or core money to do some work with a support worker at home around giving change. And specifically giving change in that environment. My son has a casual job at a basketball stadium where everything is priced as $1 or $1.50. You know, it's always in dollar or 50-cent chunks. And we've done work with a provider, with just a support worker at home, to practice giving change. And she's found an app called Jungle Coins where you can do some practices there. But we took photos of, you know, the chips and the chicken chips and the drinks of how much things cost, and we actually practiced giving change at home as well. The question about SWS, I assume is related to the supported wage system. So the supported wage system is not any sort of, is not a provision of support, but what that allows is that for people with intellectual disability, or for people with disability who are not as productive on a task level as other people, in that they might do some tasks more slowly, they can be assessed to be given less than the award. So if the award is a certain amount and your person maybe does things at 75% of the pace, so they take, you know, just a bit longer to do every task than everyone else. So in a shift, they'll only do about 75% of the work as anyone else. There's the supported wage system makes it legal. There's a whole system that goes around it, but they can be assessed at 75% and then they'll get paid 75% of the award wage. And there are a lot of people that have mixed feelings about whether or not people with disability should be paid full wages, but we do know that that can be a helpful way of getting in the door, particularly in small business where they don't have a lot of cash to spare, is that you can say, well, if you give me this job and I'm not as fast, then in fact you don't have to pay me quite as much. Okay, Eben, if we could go back to where we were, which is around the everyone, no, you were right there, the Everyone Can Work website. So the Everyone Can Work website is a place that you can go to hopefully find information that is helpful for you. Who is it for? It's for people with intellectual disability and their families at different ages and stages. Whether you're just starting out with thinking about employment, your person might still be in primary school, to preparing to transition from school, school leavers, or people thinking about open employment later on in their life. It's also for supporters such as support staff, teachers and employers, and of course families. The information that's available, there's practical information to help at each stage. There's research around open employment. There's if you keep an eye out later this month or at the end of this month, we'll be putting some evidence pieces up to link through to the various items that we have up there to show you where the evidence for our suggestions comes from. There's some people's real life open employment stories, and we will have some videos up next month. And so again, keep an eye on our social media, or you might like to sign up for our e-news, and so that way you'll be informed when the videos come out. There's also some easy read information for your young person with intellectual disability that talks about what is open employment, what is work, some other resources that you might be that might be helpful in having those conversations that I mentioned that you might want to have at a family level. And the website's been designed so that you can revisit at different stages to find the information you need. We've tried to have a no wrong door approach, so that way it's helpful when you revisit and revisit. So how do you find the information that you need right now? You can do that in different ways. Next slide. One of the things that you can do is tab on the tabs or boxes, you know, at in the front page of the website, but you can also use the My Employment pathway. This is what's on screen now. When you click onto the Start Now of My Employment pathway, it'll ask you some questions about who you are and what the age of your person and what you're looking for, and then it will suggest a whole lot of resources that are on the website. So some people find that a really helpful way of doing things. Some other people just like to navigate their own way around the website. There's nothing that you can't, everything that's available on The My Employment Pathway Wizard is also available just by exploring the website on your own. And we even have an A to Z of open employment. There's a lot of jargon in open employment. There's a lot of, as you just said, I just saw the SWS and had to guess what the acronym was. So certainly if I got that wrong, feel free to pop it in the chat so that I know to get that right. And we explain a lot of the technical terms. We sort of re-explain a lot of the things that are on the government websites where they use a lot of jargon and it can be hard to understand. So I'd like to thank you very much for participating in the webinar today. As we know, an hour can go very quickly. We'd be really grateful if you were able to take a moment to tell us what you thought about the webinar. It'll let us know whether or not this was helpful, and if it was helpful, it'll help us know what the most helpful things were. You'll see that Katie has just put into the chat the post-webinar survey. In a perfect world, we'd love you to take the pre-webinar survey and the post-webinar survey, but certainly anyone that wasn't able to do that, we would welcome your feedback to tell us what was helpful. As you would know, organisations like us get government funding to do workshops like this, and so it's helpful for us to be able to tell the funder what worked and what didn't work. And of course, we want to do the best thing by you and make sure that what we present is the most helpful thing as possible. If you'd like to get in touch with Inclusion Australia, there's our phone number, our Twitter handle, our website, and our contact email address. I do have to let you know that we are not in a position to provide individual support. We're not able to help you navigate individually. It's one of the reasons that we have created this resource to help people manage that themselves. If you'd like more support directly, you might find that disability-specific organisations such as the Down Syndrome Associations might be helpful, or you might be able to link into the organisations, for instance, that are available via the Peer Connect website. And of course, if you're having a particular problem with a provider, then individual advocacy might be helpful for you as well. But in the meantime, we hope very much that the website has been helpful for you and that this webinar sparks some thinking, and we wish you all the very best of luck in the journey ahead of you, and all power to you. I'll just let the chat go for about another minute and then we'll sign off. But thank you very much once again for attending.